Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Adam Burke from BangTheBook.com. Coming to look at game 339-340 here. It is the Apple Cup. Washington State takes on Washington. The Huskies an 8-point favorite in this game, total of 63.5. Over at BangTheBook.com, we got coverage of this and every game here during rivalry week. Also daily coverage in the NBA, NHL, and college basketball. A lot of good stuff going on over at the website. Please make sure you head on over there and check it all out. A lot of good stuff on Bang the Book Radio as well. Every Monday through Friday, you can hear the segments right here on our Bang the Book YouTube page, or you can find us on Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you stream and download your podcast content. All right, it is the Apple Cup here again. Washington, 8-point favorite, total 63.5. You got to wonder, is this Washington State's best chance to beat Washington? The Huskies really struggling this year, 6-5 team. They are going to a bowl game, but they've had all sorts of issues here, basically from the start of the season. However, Washington State's had a lot of issues too. Mike Leach been very critical of his team publicly and I'm sure privately as well. So an interesting game here with a couple of teams that really aren't having the regular seasons that they had hoped, but of course winning this rivalry game going to soften that blow quite a bit. The last 6 years for Washington State in this game, and again, keep in mind as you hear these numbers, the context of this Washington State offense year in and year out. Last 6 years against Washington, 15, 14, 17, 10, 13, and 17 points for the Cougars. And again, as we know, running that air raid offense, they're one of the top teams in the country in yards per play just about every year. They've had next to no success against this Washington Huskies defense. And the Huskies, to their credit, at least 27 points on offense in all six of those games. 3 of those games, they've scored 40 or more points. Washington 5-0 straight up, 5-0 against the spread in the last 5 Apple Cup meetings. But that being said, this is the weakest Washington's defense has been in quite some time. They're not bad, per se, but they're not Washington-level defenses here. 40th in yards per play allowed on the season, 5.5 yards per play allowed in conference play. 40th is not bad out of 130 teams. But Washington, the last 3 years, they were 11th, 4th, and 4th. And even if you go back to 2015, they were 23rd in yards per play. So they've been a top 25 defense in yards per play the last 4 years. Essentially a top 10 defense the last 3 years. This year, they're 40th. So they have backed off a little bit from their annual dominance here. So you wonder, is this just a matchup thing against Washington State, or are they just a really good defense year in and year out? It's probably a little bit of both, but this year, they're not that really good defense. They're a pretty good defense. They're a solid defense. They're not on the level that they've been here over the last few years. And part of that comes from struggling a little bit against the pass. Last year, Washington lost a lot from their secondary, as we know. This year, 31st in yards per pass attempt against. Again, not bad, just not Washington level, not what we're accustomed to seeing. The last 3 years in yards per pass attempt allowed, 8th, 10th, and 4th. Now, Washington State, on the other hand, defensively, they are awful this year. They are 127th in the country in yards per play allowed on defense. Last year, they were 59th. They've allowed 1.24 more yards per play this season than they did last season. Do we maybe have an overbrewing in Seattle here this time around? The line has gone up from -6 to -8. So there's not a whole lot of belief in Mike Leach's team and what has been a very one-sided rivalry. Again, 5-0 straight up and against the spread the last 5 years for Washington. They've won this game 9 of the last 10 times. My line is -7 here. So wasn't surprised to see the 6 or 6.5 go away. Little surprised to see this one go all the way up to 8. That being said, I've got to trust in Chris Peterson, until I have a reason not to in this head-to-head rivalry. And maybe this is the year, and maybe Washington's defense is down far enough for Washington State to have some success, but I just can't see enough stops from this Washington State defense. I can't see them getting off the field enough. And as we know, their margin for error very slim against Washington anyway. So give me Washington -8. I do lean over here. Again, weather not going to be a factor. Both of these defenses a little bit porous. Obviously, Washington State's much more so. Washington has had Washington State's number, though, so I've got to take Washington here, even with the elevated line at -8. But again, I do lean over. Maybe this is a sneaky little over candidate there with some decent weather in Seattle for the Apple Cup. I'm Adam Burke for BangTheBook.com.